He's rusty and trusty, and he's in our studio today talking to you. Hey guys, this is Dave Tim from the Learning Firearms channel. Thank you very much for checking out this video. We're excited to start a series where we're talking about gun trusts. Now, we'll talk a little bit about the NFA, trusts, individuals, Form 4s, Form 1s, 41Fs, all this stuff that you've been hearing about but maybe don't quite know about. And we brought a special guest to help us learn about this together. I would like to introduce to you Ben Rust. Ben is an attorney out of the Twin Cities in Minnesota. He's a phenomenal resource when it comes to NFA law, trust law, developing trusts, estate planning, things like that. And we figured what better person to bring in than an actual attorney who is well-versed and experienced with this. So Ben, thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks for having me, I appreciate it.
Oh, it is our honor. So for those of you guys that don't know, Ben specializes in gun trusts in Minnesota. So some of what we're going to tell you today may apply to Minnesota law. So we're going to give the disclaimer that this is not legal advice. You should establish your own relationship with a qualified, competent attorney in your state who is familiar with your laws, your regulations, and what will work best for you in your individual circumstance. But for more information about Ben's practice, we'll have a link right there in the description below to his office. So if you're in Minnesota, Ben is the guy to talk to. And disclosure, I refer a lot of people to Ben. I don't get a single penny. I don't get commission or anything like that. Have you written me any commission checks or kickbacks?
No, that's actually against the law.
See, so I don't get anything. It's against the law, and we're both law people in a way, shape, or form. So he's just a good guy. He's a gun guy. He's knowledgeable, so we're just happy to have him. Before we get into this video, which is going to be kind of Trust 101, we wanted to quickly go over some terms that we will spend more time on in the future, videos, elaborating a little bit more. And for this purposes, we're really focusing on NFA or Title II arms, which is basically your short barrel rifles, short barrel shotguns, AOWs, which is kind of a catch-all, suppressors, machine guns. Those are regulated arms that you'd have to go through the NFA process. So a Title II gun isn't something that you're generally going to go to a gun store, buy with your permit, or just fill out a form and leave with. There's more to it. Yeah. But Form 1 is an application to make a firearm. Even something as simple as assembling two pieces, such as an upper and a lower, is making. A Form 4 is taking an already manufactured firearm and just transferring it to you or the trust. You'll also hear about Certificate of Compliance, which is actually going away, but that was just basically something that says, yes, I am who I say I am. And the other part is CLEO, or CLEO. That's just Chief Law Enforcement Officer of your jurisdiction. It doesn't necessarily have to be the police chief. But we're going to dive more into some of those terms as the video series progresses. But just in case you're hearing some of this stuff, don't you think it's just coming out of left field. Ben, probably, maybe not the most common, but one of the most common questions I get, we have an individual, a person now who has decided they want to own an NFA item, whether it be a suppressor or a short barrel rifle or a AOW, a short barrel shotgun in certain states, maybe even a machine gun in certain states. Now they're at that crossroads of, do they go down the individual route or do they create a trust and go down the trust route? I personally feel there are benefits to using a trust, but you know better than anybody probably what the pros and cons are. So what are some benefits? Why would someone choose to create a trust and use that as their entity moving forward?
Sure. There are three primary benefits to using a trust for NFA firearms. The first is ease of acquisition. The second is control of those firearms during the person's lifetime. And then third is passing those on when the person dies. Right now, if you buy with a trust, you don't have to get fingerprinted, you don't have to get photographed, and you don't have to involve your chief law enforcement officer at all. If you buy as an individual, you have to do all three of those things. And then as far as controlling them during your lifetime, a trust actually enhances your ability to control them during your lifetime. If you become incapacitated, you've got a successor trustee who can step in, move the firearms somewhere if they need to be moved, sell them if they need to be sold to pay for your medical care. And when you're alive and well, you can share those firearms with anyone that you choose by naming that person as a trustee of your trust, because any trustee of the trust can legally possess trust firearms. At the grantor or the trust creator's death, a trust helps to pass those firearms on because it gives clear guidance and it allows the grantor to pick someone in advance that knows something about firearms, and you're not going to just dump this on someone who doesn't really know anything about firearms, doesn't really like firearms, perhaps.
Sure.
You get to pick the person who's going to do it, and you get to give them clear instructions on how to do it properly,
Sure.
so that no one commits an accidental felony.
And that's a really good point. One of the things that I'll be right up front with you is when I first started getting into NFA things, I was a single guy, didn't really think much about future planning, and now that I'm married and have kids, it's definitely something to consider. So one of the biggest reasons why I'm going the trust route, from here on out, is the future. I can leave things to the trust, and I know that those are just burdens that if something should ever happen to me or I'm unable to care for things, those are burdens that I don't necessarily need to leave on people that I care about. So I think it's just a really nice tool to use. Let's kind of get into it. I think one of the things that people ask about, especially if they're new to firearms, is what is NFA? What they hear about this, but they don't exactly know what the difference between that and like a standard, duck hunting shotgun or a pistol or something like that. So let's just dive right into it.
Sure. That's probably the most common question I get from the materials on my website is I'll refers to NFA firearms. What are those? Simply put, they're firearms that are regulated by the National Firearms Act. Things like short barrel rifles, silencers, short barrel shotguns, machine guns, destructive devices, and AOWs. And to get one of them, you've got to pay a $200 transfer tax to the ATF, go through a whole lot of paperwork, and wait quite a long while before you can actually take possession of the thing that you purchased.
So it's not illegal to own a silencer or a suppressor or a short barrel rifle such as this one, or in some states a machine gun.
Correct.
Yeah.
It's not, you don't need a Class 3 license. It's not like you're getting a dealer's license. You're just paying a tax to the federal government on the transfer of the firearm from the dealer to you.
Like a titling fee.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like a transfer title.
Now we are a Class 3 dealer, so we carry this stuff. We're allowed to sell this stuff. This is my personal SBR, but this happens to be inventory. Now if you own one of these, at the end of this, you get this fancy thing right here, which is basically like your title. And you'll hear something referred to as your tax stamp, and that's actually the stamp on the form that shows you paid the tax. That's really what it is. So we often get questions on someone who wants to buy an NFA item. What should they do? Because you can own an NFA item as an individual.
You can.
Or you can own an NFA item through a trust, or technically the trust would own it. And I think there's a lot of benefits to the trust. And that's what we're going to talk about a little bit more. So just to kind of quash some of those myths about, well, can you own this, can you not? No matter what Hollywood tells you, you actually can own a lot of cool stuff.
You can. Yeah. In Minnesota, it's a little more difficult, but at the federal level, there aren't as many restrictions as you probably think.
Yeah. So let's talk about trusts in general. What is a trust, Ben?
What is a trust in general is basically the delivery of property from one person to another person for the benefit of a third person. You can do that. In Minnesota, we can actually do that so that one person plays all three roles. There has to be another beneficiary other than, one person can't do everything, but you can be a beneficiary. So you've got initially what we call the person who creates a trust, we call them either a grantor or a settlor. Minnesota just changed their trust code to change the term from grantor to settlor. They are the person that creates the trust, they set it up, they have complete control over it during their lifetime.
Okay, so that's like the boss.
Correct.
Okay.
If you want to think of it like a business, they own the trust.
Okay.
They don't technically own it, but...
Yeah, the trust is kind of its own thing.
Yeah, if you want to think about it like that.
But they're like in the driver's seat.
Correct.
Okay. All right, so we have that person, the settlor or the grantor or the creator. All right, so sometimes you might hear those terms used
interchangeably.
Yeah.
Trust creator, you might hear that word thrown around as well. And so they are the person who starts the trust. They contribute property to the trust, and they actually transfer legal title to that property to a person called the trustee. And the trustee, if you want to think of it like a business, they are the manager. They are basically the administrator. They take care of storing it, insuring it, keeping it safe, maintaining the property, letting the beneficiaries of the trust use that property. So their job is basically a job. They have to basically do whatever the grantor set out in the language of the trust.
Okay.
The beneficiaries of the trust are the people who benefit from the trust. During the grantor's lifetime, they get to use the firearms.
Okay.
So when you create a trust, that's why you will initially fill all three roles, because you want to control it, you want to manage it, and you also want to benefit from it. You don't want to just basically let other people shoot your guns, you want to shoot your guns.
Sure.
There has to be another beneficiary besides yourself, otherwise there's literally no distinction between a trust and you as a human being. So there's got to be someone else that benefits from it, but that person can be just like someone who inherits the firearm from you after your death.
Okay. So those three roles are pretty important for you to define while you're setting up the trust. And that's why it's also important, I think, to use an attorney. I know there's a lot of companies out there that offer, a 1-800-gun trust, or I don't know if that's a real thing or not.
I don't know either.
But or like so. Gun Trusts Are Us or something. There's these, I don't want to call them trust mills, but basically you just fill out a PDF form online or whatever, and then they email you back something hoping that it works. But the benefit of working with a guy like you, and this is feedback from customers that have come to me and tell me about working with Ben, is that they actually plan some of these things and kind of think about what the pros and cons are for picking certain people. So we have the grantor, the creator, they're in the driver's seat. We have a trustee, maybe they're riding shotgun for now, but they might slide over and drive for a while. And then the beneficiaries are in the back seat, and they'll eventually move up to gain the items, right?
Eventually, with most trusts, what will happen after the grantor dies is that the trust will distribute the property in the trust to the beneficiaries outright.
Okay.
You could give it to them outright. You could put it into a trust that they already control. If they already have their own gun trust, you can transfer it from your trust to theirs, or you can have your trust set up so that it creates a new trust after your death. To create sort of a family armory that can last for generations. So a trust is very flexible. It can do very powerful. It can do a lot of things.
Now, speaking generally for trusts, can the trust own other stuff other than guns?
Trust can own any kind of property that you can imagine. Anything that you can think of, you can put into a trust. The reason that we have this thing called a gun trust is that firearms are different from just about every other kind of property you can imagine. So you're not going to get arrested if you walk into a coffee shop and pull out your stock certificate. If you go into a coffee shop and pull out your firearm, you may have some problems. You can give your stock certificate to anyone you want. There's no restrictions on who can receive that sort of property. With a firearm, obviously, there are categories of people who are prohibited from owning firearms, and you wouldn't want those people to come into either possession or ownership of those firearms.
So I think that is a good point just to talk about the difference between a general trust. Since a trust could own, in theory, anything, let's talk specifically about a gun trust and what makes it special, for our purpose of owning NFA items.
A good gun trust will have language in it that will immediately disqualify a beneficiary from receiving a distribution after your death, or from using the firearms during your life if, for example, they ever become a prohibited person, whether that's because they committed a felony, whether it's because they have a misdemeanor domestic violence conviction, if they were involuntarily committed, maybe they started using narcotics after they got a prescription painkiller prescription.
Yep.
Whatever the reason might be, you don't want someone who's prohibited from possessing trust property. A good gun trust will automatically disqualify that person from being a beneficiary.
So that's a really good point to separate a standard 1-800 trust, a generic trust, from a gun-specific trust. It'll have those specific language points.
Correct. If you're buying a form at your local office supply store, it's not going to have that particular language in it. It may be, in fact, a valid trust, and it may pass ATF scrutiny. Your transfer might get approved, but there's things that are going to pop up that if your trustee literally follows the directions in the trust, they may end up committing a crime.
We've talked about a lot of good stuff. We talked about Trust 101, and hopefully this answered some of the basic questions that you guys have. Now, one of the things that we didn't talk about a lot in detail was 41F. And people are probably maybe watching this going, well, 41F, I've been hearing a lot about this. So we're going to actually dedicate the next video to 41F. So make sure you check that out. We'll have a link to that video in the description below. Now, Ben is a phenomenal lawyer specializing in Minnesota, gun trust. So if you're in Minnesota and looking for a good attorney to develop your trust, Ben is the guy that I recommend everybody to. But Ben, what if somebody's not in Minnesota? Where do they find a good lawyer?
The best place I think to go is gunlawcommunity.com. You can find attorneys in just about every state that specialize in gun trusts. They will give you the personal attention that you need, and they're outstanding attorneys.
And they'll develop that relationship with you as well. So that's gunlawcommunity.com. We'll put a link to that in the description as well. So make sure you check that out if you're not in Minnesota. Ben, thank you again for your time and coming on, the show, helping us out, learning about trusts. Check out the next video on 41F. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them below. You can learn more about us on our webpage or check us out on Facebook. We really appreciate you checking out this video, watching it, subscribing. Thank you guys very much, and have a great day.